Hi, and welcome to the 2017-2018 Atlanta Public Schools Understanding Gifted Identification and Assessment Video Informational. If you have questions about the gifted and talented education, identification, and assessment process in Atlanta Public Schools, then you've come to the right place. This video has been created with the intended audience of parents of students wanting to know more about the gifted testing process here in Atlanta Public Schools, or who have students who are going to be assessed for the gifted program during the 2017-2018 school year. The purpose of this presentation is to inform parents of the gifted assessment process and the identification criteria for the gifted and talented program. You've probably found us on the APS Gifted webpage. Please note that there are a number of other important and valuable resources available on this page regarding the identification process. Please take some time to access and review our frequently asked questions as well. Let's start by defining a gifted student. The Georgia DOE defines a gifted student as a student who demonstrates a high degree of intellectual and/or creative ability, exhibits an exceptionally high degree of motivation, and/or excels in specific academic fields, and who needs special instruction and/or special ancillary services to achieve at levels commensurate with his or her abilities. You'll notice I put emphasis on 4 different areas: intellectual ability, creative ability, motivation, and academic fields or achievement. We're going to come back to each of these 4 areas a little bit later in the presentation as we talk about how gifted students are identified. In Atlanta Public Schools, there are 2 opportunities for assessment for gifted and talented education. The first opportunity is for all students who were tested in Atlanta Public Schools during the previous school year. For these students, the eligibility teams at each school automatically review the current data collected on the student to see if it substantiates the use of alternative assessments. This process takes place in the fall, and any additional testing will take place in September and October. Again, all students who were tested during the prior school year will have their data reviewed. You will receive notification if your child qualifies for any additional alternative assessment so that you can grant consent for testing. Our second and larger opportunity for assessment is our first look testing. All students who were not tested in the previous year will be screened for possible referral for gifted testing. We have 3 processes by which we could refer students. That is automatic referral, teacher referral, and parent referral. Let's take a closer look at each of these. Automatic referral is a data-driven process which includes reviewing a student's nationally normed test data. Data is reviewed from a number of sources and varies based on a student's grade level. In Atlanta Public Schools, students in grades K through 8 take the STAR assessment. While this assessment cannot be used to support a gifted identification, the data from it is used to refer students for testing. Students scoring at or above the 85th percentile in either reading or math meet the criteria for a data-driven automatic referral. In grades 10 through 11, we use students' PSAT scores in reading, writing, or math as a possible automatic referral. The Georgia Milestones End of Grade Assessment is also used as a possible source of referral. Students in grades 4 through 9 who scored in the top 10 percentile here in Atlanta Public Schools based on our local norms meet the criteria for a data-driven automatic referral. GPA is also used as a source of automatic referral for students in grades 9 through 11. Students in grade 9 through 11 only who have a 2-year core cumulative average of 3.5 or greater on a 4.0 scale may have their GPA considered and meet the criteria for an automatic data-driven referral. Finally, students who are new to our district and furnish test scores from their prior district or school with nationally normed achievement data, we would look at this to see if we can use it as a source of automatic referral as well. So if you moved from a different state or a private school, please be sure you furnish any available test scores to your new APS school. In addition to our automatic referral process, we also have a teacher referral process here in Atlanta Public Schools. For the teacher referral process, it's based on information gathered through the TABS, or Traits, Aptitudes, and Behaviors observation process. This process asks teachers who work with students to indicate their observation of 10 different traits, aptitudes, or behaviors. The demonstration of these possible gifted characteristics are rated when observed at superior degrees and on a consistent basis. Teachers receive training on these tabs and are aware as well that the demonstration of these traits, aptitudes, or behaviors may not always necessarily be positive. For example, the late comedian Robin Williams, a great impersonator, probably found it entertaining to mimic his teacher as a child. Although funny to some, I'm certain his teacher might have disagreed. Nonetheless, humor was certainly being displayed. Depending on the tab's results and with supporting documentation collected by the eligibility team, a student may be referred through teacher referral for gifted assessment. This process takes place in October. In addition to automatic referrals and teacher referrals, in Atlanta Public Schools we also accept parent referrals. Parents may submit a parental referral and consent for testing form to their local school. These forms are available at the local school or on the APS Gifted website at www.atlantapublicschools.us/gifted. Please note the deadline for submitting a parent referral for the current school year is September 29, 2017. Late submissions will not be accepted. Once again, please be sure you return these forms to the gifted teacher at your local school and not to the Office of Gifted and Talented Education. Additionally, if your child was a First Look child last year, please remember that they will automatically be considered for a second look to see what, if any, alternative assessments they may qualify for based on district criteria. If your student received First Look assessments last year, there is no need to do a parent referral this year. Regardless of whether a student was referred through our automatic referral process, our teacher referral process, or the parent referral process, once a student is referred for testing, data must be gathered in 4 areas. Those 4 areas are mental ability, achievement, creativity, and motivation, which aligns directly with the DOE's definition of a gifted child. When gathering the data in each of these 4 areas, the majority of the areas require the reporting results to be a National Percentile Ranking, or NPR. For this, a quick review of the bell curve is important. An NPR result is comparing your student to other students in the same norm group at time of testing. For each test, we'll talk about that norm group. For example, students might be compared to peers who were the same age at time of testing or same grade at time of testing. It compares your student's performance to other students in the same norm group's performance across the nation. An NPR score of 50, for example, would mean your student was exactly average when compared across the nation to the norm group. If we lined up 100 students, your student would have performed at or better than 50 of them. Keep this bell curve in mind as we talk about each assessment and the minimum national percentile ranking scores that are needed to meet the criteria for gifted eligibility. The first area in which we gather data is the area of mental ability. Mental ability assesses students' abilities in reasoning and problem solving. For First Look students, we use the Cognitive Abilities Test, or COGAT. It's usually given in January to February. It is a nationally normed test, so that bell curve we just talked about means that your student's performance is being compared to other students nationally. It is an age norm test, which means they're being compared to other students the same age at time of testing. The COGAT produces 3 different scores: a verbal score, a quantitative score, and a nonverbal score. Each of those are also considered together to create a composite score, as well as a partial composite looking at any 2 of those components might also be reported. In order to meet the Georgia DOE criteria for the area of mental ability, a student must have a national percentile ranking in the 96th percentile or higher in one of those areas. They can have a 96th NPR in verbal, or quantitative, or nonverbal, or composite, or partial composite when being identified through multiple criteria. But let's remember that that 96th percentile means that if I lined up 100 students, your child performed at or better than 96 of them. That's on the upper end of the bell curve. The next area in which we gather data is the area of achievement. Achievement is measuring skills that can be learned. These are commonly used in schools to measure skills that have been taught and hopefully learned. New for the 2017-2018 school year, students referred for gifted and talented education testing will be given the Measures of Academic Progress, or MAP test. Again, this testing will take place in the January to February time frame. It is a nationally normed test that is grade normed and computer adaptive. By grade normed, we mean that your student will be compared to other students the same grade at time of testing versus the mental ability COGAT test where they were compared to other students the same age. The district also gives the PSAT to students, so students in grades 10 through 11 who have that data available, we can also look at that for the area of achievement. It is also a nationally normed test and grade normed. Please note that the minimum requirement to meet the criteria in the area of achievement for gifted eligibility is a national percentile ranking of the 90th percentile or higher in either reading or math. Therefore, thinking of the bell curve again, that means the students performed better than 90 students if we lined up 100 in either reading or math. The third area in which we must gather data is the area of creativity. For first look students, we use the Torrance Test of Creative Thinking, or the TTCT. The TTCT is given in the month of December. It measures creativity through figural responses. I always like to let parents know, however, that students are not assessed on their artistic ability. Instead, they're assessed on the thinking behind their figural responses. The TTCT is a nationally normed test. For the area of creativity, we receive both an age norm and a grade norm, and we report that which is higher, that which is to the advantage of your student. Please note that the NPR of the 90th percentile or higher is required to meet the criteria for gifted identification in the area of creativity. The TTCT, as I mentioned, measures a student's ability to think creatively. They do this by measuring a number of constructs of creativity. For example, fluency, or the ability to come up with a lot of ideas. Originality, or the ability to come up with unique ideas. Elaboration, which is the ability to go into detail about their ideas. Their ability to think abstractly. Their resistance to premature closure, which refers to a student's ability to keep an open mind, as well as they're assessed through a checklist of creative strengths, which involves things like students showing fantasy and visualization. Please note that the TTCT is a highly researched, reliable, and valid instrument. Once again, students must score at or above the 90th percentile based on either their age or grade norm in order to meet the gifted eligibility criteria in the area of creativity. The fourth and final area in which we gather data is the area of motivation. Motivation measures the student's drive or persistence, their desire to succeed, their tendency to enjoy challenging tasks, and the ability to work well without encouragement or reinforcement. For students in grades K through 7, we use the Gifted Rating Scales, or GRS. This is completed by 2 trained evaluators who know your child well. This is done in the January to February time frame. It is an age norm test, and the highest of the 2 scores is reported, that which is to the advantage of your child. For students in grades 8, we use the Children's Academic Intrinsic Motivation Inventory, or CAMI. This is completed by the student and is also done in the January to February time frame. In grades 8 through 11, we can also consider a student's GPA in their core content classes. For students in grades 9 through 12, we can also consider a cumulative average at or above a 90 in advanced content courses. Please note the requirement for the area of motivation in determining gifted eligibility is the 90th percentile. Once the data has been gathered in all 4 areas, an eligibility decision can be made. Students can be determined eligible for gifted through 2 different options. Option A, the psychometric approach, or Option B, the multiple criteria approach. The majority of students identified for gifted services are identified through Option B, where affirmative scores are found in 3 of the 4 categories. Students identified through Option A have 2 pieces of data that support a gifted identification. However, for that to be effective, a student must have a mental ability composite score at or above the 96th percentile, as well as a qualifying achievement score. Additionally, Option A composite scores are considered in the reference grades only. For example, if Alice takes the cognitive abilities test in the 2nd grade and scores a composite score at the 96th percentile, she is scored insufficiently to be considered for Option A. When she becomes a 3rd grader, although her score now meets the criteria for Option A composite requirements, she is now not in the referenced grade as reflected in Atlanta Public Schools' implementation of the Georgia Board Rule. Students must meet the required criteria while in the current grade. If you haven't already navigated to our website at www.atlantapublicschools.us/gifted, I'd recommend taking some time to do that now. There you will also find the APS implementation of Georgia Board Rule that describes this specifically. It is also important to note that gifted eligibility will be determined based upon the findings of Atlanta Public Schools approved assessments. Private testing or evaluations will not be accepted to establish eligibility for APS gifted services. If your student is referred for gifted testing and you sign consent to have the data gathered in the 4 areas we just reviewed, it's important for you to be aware of a few assessment factoids. Know that testing can take place in up to 6 sessions, with each session lasting approximately 1 hour, which includes distributing materials and administering the assessment. Our policy is to ask students if they feel well, so we know they're at their best for testing. Please do be mindful of attendance. The test windows are given broadly so that each school can determine the exact dates that testing will occur. However, know that due to school assemblies, local scheduling, field trips, it's impossible for us to say exactly what day your student might be tested. So we ask that if your child is feeling well, you be sure to send them to school during the test window. Makeup testing does delay results. As a reminder, our second look testing is completed by early October. Services will begin no later than the 2nd semester and may vary depending on the school's ability to schedule the child. First look testing is completed by February. Results are available by April, and services will begin the following school year, or fall 2018. As a reminder, if your student is a second look student, meaning they were tested last year and still have current data, and their data substantiates the use of some alternative assessments, keep in mind that the student may not feel like she or he was tested. Some of the assessments don't feel like a formal test. Additionally, note that less scoring time is required for these assessments, which is why the results are available at a faster turnaround rate than our first look assessments, which are shipped off to vendors for scoring. Once all the data has been collected, a determination of eligibility will be made by the local school's eligibility team. If your student is found eligible, the eligibility report will be distributed. Note that the eligibility results or report will be filed at the school, but we also ask that you keep a copy with your student's other vital records. This is because eligibility is valid statewide. If you were to leave Atlanta Public Schools and transfer to another school within the state of Georgia, there would be gifted reciprocity. Also, within the state of Georgia, it's important to note that once a student is determined eligible, they are always eligible. No retesting is needed. For students who are determined ineligible, an eligibility report will also be distributed. As alluded to, the data for all students who are tested is automatically reviewed in the fall of the next school year for all individual students tested in the previous year. We do this, or the local school eligibility team does this, to see if the student qualifies for a second look, which is alternative assessments based on our district criteria. Please note that differentiation will continue to occur in the regular classroom. Your student was referred for gifted testing. That means they probably have a lot of promise. Even though they were ineligible, please continue to partner with your local school to make sure that their needs are being met in the classroom. Again, if your student was not found eligible, they will be considered as a possible second look during the following school year. So all students who were tested as a first look during this current 2017-2018 school year will have their data reviewed in fall 2018 to see if they meet district criteria for a second look. However, remember that all the scores gathered are valid for 2 years. The nationally normed test will not be re-administered within the 2-year window. Therefore, a student who takes a COGAT or a TTCT or a MAP this year will not receive that same assessment the following year. This chart illustrates the instruments most commonly used for first look students and second look students. The gifted eligibility team at the local school will only use one instrument for each of the 4 categories. Based upon previous testing experiences, some children may already have test data that can be used in one or more of the categories. Children will not be tested unnecessarily, and the eligibility team will use the relevant data about your student to select the appropriate instrument for each student. The team will not exhaust all of its options in each category during any referral or testing window. If you have any questions about the gifted and talented education testing and identification process here in Atlanta Public Schools, please first reach out to the gifted teacher at your child's school. Every school has a local eligibility team as well as a gifted teacher who should be able to answer many of your questions. If you have remaining questions, please feel free to contact the Atlanta Public Schools Office of Gifted and Talented Education. You've probably already found our website by this point, especially if you're watching this video, but if you haven't, it can be reached at www.atlantapublicsschools.us/gifted. On the left-hand side is a link that says Identifying Gifted Students. Click there for information specifically related to our testing process. Additionally, we can be reached by phone at 404-802-7585. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this parent informational video. We look forward to working with you and your students in Atlanta Public Schools.